Good evening. I will call this meeting to order at 6 p.m. We'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. All right. At this time, I will ask for roll call.
Commissioner Ingman.
Here.
Commissioner Cox.
Present.
Commissioner Settlemeyer.
Here.
Chair Robinson.
Here.
Commissioner Riles.
Here.
Commissioner Winterode.
Here.
Commissioner LaGrasse has an excused absence.
Okay, at this time, I will ask if everyone has had a chance. Excuse me. Did everyone get a copy and have a chance to review the minutes from our last meeting? Do I hear any motions?
I move to approve as written.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Sorry. Those opposed, same sign. Okay, very good. Business from the public. I can make a pretty good guess. Come on up, Lisa.
Good evening. Lisa Grotto, Albany Downtown Association. It's interesting being the middle of the month instead of the beginning of the month. So I'm here to provide a quick downtown update. One of the exciting things that's happening is we're in the middle of trying to secure another Oregon Main Street revitalization grant. There's an article here you can read, but a lot of the things are already in progress. We sent out a request to the building owners and published it in our newsletter and other means to invite people to submit a pre-application. The eligible businesses are within the Albany's Main Street district, which is close to the historic district boundaries. This grant is from lottery funds, and in the past we have been able to secure 3 grants. Each at $200,000 apiece to restore different buildings downtown. Because they were able to get $10 million this cycle instead of $5 million, the grant top opportunity will be $400,000 per grant instead of $200,000. Grants that are for requests of $20,000, $100,000, or $400,000 will be treated equally. It's based on the need for the community to do that project that's important to them. If you ask for a lesser amount, it just means there'll be more to go around. In the past, they've done 27, 28 grants, so we don't know if they'll be managing 50 plus grants or whether they'll just be bigger grants. We're just hoping that we'll get a piece of the pie, and we've been doing well in the past, and there is a question is whether or not you've participated in the past year. Have you done well? And I asked the big question. They said, yes, you're doing everything we want right, and you're reporting correctly. You would get a high mark in that category. Now, if you hadn't applied before, there it just would be a not applicable answer. Doesn't give us any more leverage. Just it would be a ding if we didn't manage it well. To that end, we received 2 checks on Friday and dispersed them yesterday. Together, they're $110,000 for 2 of our active projects. So that would be for the Briggs building, which formerly housed the Lego store, and also the Oregon Electric Railway Station, former Tedici's future home of Cerberus. As far as the way the grant works, the portion of the grant has to be completed by a deadline. For the Oregon Electric project, that is April of this year. And for the Briggs building, it's April of next year. Does not mean they have to have occupancy. It does mean they have to finish the projects that were listed on the grant. So don't stress out if you see something about Cerberus opening in July to celebrate the opening of the original train station. The grant will be finished on time. So anyway, that was all very exciting. I think that's really relevant to landmarks that we, as Curry said in a training that many of us sat in on Thursday, Curry Gill is with the Oregon Heritage and manages the grants. She said, if you secure 2 of these, you will be securing close to $1 million for your community. What other organization, other than a Main Street, has this opportunity? In some towns, there's no opportunity to bring $1 million home. So we're hoping to do that.
Yeah, Lisa, I just can't express how grateful I am for your advocacy and taking control of this in the last few years. You've done an excellent job. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And Stephanie Gutierrez was on our board at the time, was the one that said, we've got to do this. We didn't apply in 2017. I had just started and didn't really have my feet under me yet, and didn't have a strong candidate. But we've brought it home on one already. If anybody has any questions about the Greyhound project, everything was done the way that it needed to be done in relation to the grant. Yes, it's okay to sell a building. You just may never, ever in the next 40 years, we have to track it for 40 years, sell it back to the state. So you couldn't develop a building and turning it into a state museum because they can't benefit out of their own fund. So at this point, our grant committee has reviewed some applications. They're going to be doing some tours, and we should be announcing our contender before the end of the month. And then from there, we will pursue filling out the entire grant form, which is quite the process, and that will be submitted mid-March. We'll get the good news, we hope, sometime in May, and they can start picking up hammers or whatever the tools needed somewhere around July 1st once the lottery bonds are fully funded. So that's the other trick with this. You can't start anything until we know, and then you still can't start until the money's there. So you've got to have a project that you can hurry up and wait about. So other things, just a quick highlight, Gallery Calapuya is having their big show of little art. If anybody is interested in painting an 8x8 or sculpting an 8x8, they do take submissions from the community. Details are in the newsletter. I'll provide that. It's the end of the month when they're due. Our Meet the Neighbors is on Asian Fair in celebration of Lunar New Year. We have 3 Asian restaurants downtown. Boz is Vietnamese, Jinda is Thai, and K Teriyaki, both Korean and Japanese represented. And between the 3 of them, some are open. We have all of them open 5 days a week, but at least one is open every day of the week. So if you want Asian but are willing to navigate different places, you can get Asian food every day of the week. We're so proud of how many businesses and restaurants are open on Sundays and Mondays. That wasn't the case years ago. Our volunteer spotlight was Glenn Anderson. If you don't know him, he's the man behind the mic for the Scooby Van. He brings music and fun to our downtown. And also our parade winners are highlighted, and the Civic Theater, Charlie's Aunt, opened on January 10th. A lot more activities, and I will get off the microphone unless you have any questions for me. I'll have copies after. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have anyone online? Okay, very good. Next up, we have our hearing. Quasi-judicial public hearing regarding planning file HI-25-24, an application for historic review of exterior alterations and use of substitute materials at 910 6th Avenue Southwest for deck repair and replacement porch columns. Have all commissioners received a copy of the agenda packet materials, and are you all familiar with them? I call to order this quasi-judicial public hearing at 6:08 p.m. If you wish to testify, there were 3 options available which were described on the commission agenda. Do any members wish to declare a conflict of interest?
No.
Do any members wish to report any ex parte contact?
No.
Do any members wish to report a site visit? We'll start over here.
I walked by.
Yesterday, I walked by. Yesterday, I drove by.
Walk by.
Yeah, I've been by it before, but not recently.
Do any members wish to abstain from participating in the proceedings?
Did Kathy do a site visit?
Oh, I'm sorry, Kathy.
That's okay. I did not. Thank you.
Thank you for catching me. Do any members wish to abstain from participating in the proceedings? Does anyone wish to challenge the participation of any commission member in this hearing and decision? If attending virtually, please turn on your camera and raise your hand to be called upon, or if you are attending by phone, please unmute yourself and state your name so you can be called upon.
Nobody.
At this time, I call for a reading of the meeting procedures.
Good evening. For those wishing to testify, please be aware that you must raise an issue with enough detail to afford the commission and parties an opportunity to respond to the issue if you later want to raise that issue on appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Testimony and evidence must be directed towards the approval standards staff will describe or other criteria in the comprehensive plan or development code which you believe to apply to the decision. If additional documents or evidence are provided by any party, the commission may allow a continuance or leave the record open to allow the parties a reasonable opportunity to respond. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with enough detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court.
At this time, I call for the staff report.
Thinking really hard. All right. Good evening, commissioners. For the record, Alyssa Schrems, planner with the City of Albany. So before you today is HI 2524, which is a historic review for use of substitute materials and exterior alterations at a home located at 910 6th Avenue Southwest. So this is the subject property here. As you can see, it's on 6th Avenue over near Elm Street. You'll be using the exterior alterations review criteria, which are found in ADC 7.150 and the Secretary of Interior Standards in ADC 7.160. The structure is historic contributing. You may determine that it would be a staff level review if it hadn't been bundled with that. That is something I kind of was looking at when I was writing the staff report. So that is an option available to you, or you can review it at the landmarks level for review. Both are options. And also the substitute materials review criteria, those eligibility standards are found in ADC 7.200 with the decision criteria in ADC 7.210. There is a representation of the column that's being proposed for replacement. That would be what goes there, not what is currently there. And then we have two proposed conditions for you today. Number one, exterior alteration shall be performed as specified in the report, fairly standard, and then the final historic inspection as well. And then you do have 5 options available to you. Approve the request as proposed, approve the request with conditions of approval, approve one but not the other, and then deny the requests. And then does anybody have any questions for me? All righty.
All right. We will now take public, excuse me. We will now, sorry. I got up very early this morning. We will now take testimony from the applicant. Would the applicant please state your name, address, and make any comments you may have for the commission?
My name is Brent Mosser. Excuse me, I represent TNT Builders. I think Ms. Schrems pretty well represented the scope of the project, that the porch itself would be replaced somewhat, primarily like for like. The surface will be the same standing grain fir that is there today. The alternate materials is due to the fact that the existing columns are wood. As you might imagine, they've been there a while. They're very rotten, and in replacing them with fiberglass, the intention is that they would not need replacement again for quite a long time, allowing what is preserved to remain intact and unchanged again for a while.
Do any commissioners have questions for the applicant? Richard?
I have one. From the appearance of the 1997 photograph of the house, it would appear that 5 of those columns are from 1997 and 2 of them are older. Is that correct? The two front
I wouldn't know the answer for certain, but that seems consistent with what we've seen on site. We've not done an evaluation to determine exactly when which columns were installed, but they all have, with the exception of the couple that are shown on the plans that will remain, the remainder are in similar rotten condition.
So are you thus saying that not all 7 will be replaced? And so
Let me review.
Was it 7 or 9 columns?
There are currently 9, and the 2 most forefront will remain. The other 7 would be what is proposed to be replaced.
which, if I'm hearing that right, is the oldest ones would remain, but the 1997 ones are likely to be.
The ones in front are in the best condition.
Interesting. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Mason? We can come back to you. Cameron?
So I wanted to confirm, when you say the ones in front are in the best condition, you are not planning on replacing the 2 columns that are in the front of the house facing the street, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
At this time, there's no intention of replacing those 2 columns.
okay. And then when you say that the condition of the columns is rotten, are they all equally rotten? Do we have some kind of photo evidence of the condition of each column?
I don't have that with me, but I can certainly submit it. They're primarily rotten at the bottom, and the 7 proposed for replacement are in similar states.
Okay, have you considered trying to repair them with epoxy or similar type?
The existing columns are structural, and being that they're solid wood, I think there's hesitation that an aesthetic patch would not address the structural integrity that is dwindling, I guess.
Can you provide evidence that these columns are about ready to structurally fail?
We can certainly submit evidence that they're in poor condition and that they are structural.
And was there cost estimates for trying to get replacement wood ones versus the fiberglass?
That is a good question. I have not been as on top of the bidding portion of our process. That's primarily handled by our owner and another estimator. To my knowledge, that had been briefly reviewed, and we'd not been able to identify anyone that would be able to replace them satisfactorily. And so the proposed replacement is the most accurate like for like that we've been able to find so far.
Thank you. That's my question.
I had a question. It
Mhm.
would appear that the diameter will remain the same.
Yes.
Got it. Bill? Kathy?
No questions. Thanks.
The 7 that are being removed and the 2 that are remaining, is there a difference in material or are they both the same?
Without getting too invasive, what we can tell is that they are all solid wood and all structural. Apart from that, it's difficult to say what differences that there would be other than the condition that they're in.
One last question. I read that the proposed replacement columns are similar in style but not exact. Can you elaborate just a little bit on those differences?
Yeah, I have those pictures here.
Page 23, maybe?
I would say that the elements are all present. There is a slight difference in ratio, I suppose. At the top, you can see kind of a separated bead around. It does seem that there's a slight difference in how far down that is. And so that's the primary reason why we're saying similar but not exact.
Do you know if the columns from the addition in 1987 are exact to the columns that are original to the house in the front?
I believe that our owner had reviewed that in more detail than I have. I would need to review that with him or do another site visit. Well, that's certainly something we can look at.
Any further questions for the applicant? If not, thank you.
Thank you.
We will now be taking public testimony. I will now call upon those who registered to speak during this meeting. Okay, and double check online. So if you would like to testify and you're online right now, please unmute yourself. Turn your camera on if you are on a computer.
Okay.
Oh, yep, we got Bernadette.
All right. Hey, so I submitted a letter to, so if, to outlining everything, we have not, part of FOHA, but we have not have time to review the whole thing as a group. So I submitted the letter just under my name. My name is Bernadette Niederer. I live at 1116 11th Avenue Southwest. I'm a historic preservation consultant. It's unclear to me, and so the photo shown in the application really looks like one of the front columns that were, one of the two front. It looks like it's right next to the front stairs. So I don't know if that's a representative example or not. So I really feel like there needs to be more documentation. One thing I did not mention in my letter was that replacing the existing columns with fiberglass. I don't know how that works in terms of if we're talking that these are structural columns. I'm not sure that that's, the fiberglass columns to me it could be that things have changed very much, are not necessarily structural. They are much more ornamental. And also it's incredibly wasteful to discard these 7 columns without looking into options for salvaging them and continuing their use, whether that it's in a shortened manner or in a filled manner. If we can extend the life of these by anywhere from 10 to 20 to 30 years, I think that's satisfactory versus the fiberglass replacements, which, there's a lot of people that don't care, but they are not, neither the material nor the proportions at the Capitol are really what already was there. One thing that is not clear to me, and then that's part of that letter from when the porch was built. So it does seem like these 7 columns were part of a 1990s installation. I would like to know whether those are salvage columns or were newly constructed wood columns, and that's why they're failing, because they were built with, lesser non-historic wood versus the 2 front columns. Where was I going? But I really wish the applicant had gone into more detail and done a little bit more due diligence in terms of what's there, when it was installed, or when it could have been installed, what the differences are. How close to the front, how close are the front columns to the side columns? Are they an exact match? Or are there already differences there that might mitigate this? And so I think I'm, not to be too rude to the applicant, but I'm really disappointed by the lack of rigor in examining what's needed and in sending a representative who doesn't have the information. I'm not sure where, they're coming from. And I'm, sort of disappointed by it and kind of upset by it because we are a historic district. We're trying to do something. We're trying to preserve things. And that the lack of attempt to preserve is distressing. That is, I believe, the letter to Roz saying that we elect not to be part of the review process. I called Roz Keeney to try and ask her what that was, because I think there is a case number. So I do think the porch was probably reviewed as part of that original case number that's noted there in the agenda packet. And that is it. So I strongly urge you to deny the application as it stands, or at a very minimum to hold it over pending much more information. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for the comment and the letter. Does the applicant have any rebuttal testimony?
I do agree that we certainly could do some more research into the history of the repairs and replacements on those existing columns, and that's something I intend to do. It was brought up a question of whether these would be structural columns. They would be. They would not be only fiberglass. There is a structural metal center. And in addition to reviewing the record of what has been completed as far as stages of maintenance over the years, we'll also do a more thorough comparison of the front two columns as they compare to the other 7. Just based on physical appearance, reviewing them in person, they do appear to be the same. But we've not verified that with thorough measurements. So that's certainly something we can take a look at as well.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you would be open to a continuance and open to bringing back that information?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unless, do we have any, sorry, hang on just a second. I'm off my game tonight. Any other questions for the applicant on the rebuttal testimony? Kathy?
Not a question for the applicant. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Does any staff member wish to respond to any testimony presented?
Yeah, just a little bit of clarification on what appears to have happened in 1997. So from memory, Oregon had passed a bill in, I think, the 1996 legislative cycle that made participating in historic districts and as an individually listed resource for a city and a county a voluntary thing. And so I suspect that what's going on here is that the property owner just elected not to go through review. I saw this a lot more at the county. We sent out a letter to every single person on our local inventory and was like, hey, congratulations, it's voluntary now. So that's the context I know it in. Speaking to the file from 1997, the letter there is actually that, and the plans is actually the only thing that was in there. So the file did not actually go to Landmarks Commission or get reviewed. That was just kind of the file that was created in conjunction with the building permit that was applied for and approved. So we don't have any further information regarding kind of where the columns had come from, what they were, that sort of thing. What you see in that packet is what we had in there.
So just to clarify, just to make sure I'm hearing you right, it was voluntary for a brief time.
Yes.
And that porch addition, it is likely, especially given the letter to a prior commissioner, that porch addition occurred during that time of voluntary participation.
Yes, that's what it appears to be to me based on experience I have in other jurisdictions.
So that's why we have no
Yep, that's,
application file information.
and and again, there's not like a great paper trail, but that's what I've pieced together. I remember I would see it in all of our historic files when I worked at Lynn County, as we sent that letter in 96 saying, hey, you can actually take yourself off if you'd like. So that was something that was going on at that time. Substantial changes have happened since then. The biggest changes in 2017, which makes things very much not optional. You had your chance to get off basically, and it's out the door now.
Very good.
Yep.
Thank you.
I had a question of staff.
Yes, Kathy.
Oh, thank you. Does the building, were you able to look at the building permit? Does it show replacement of those 7 columns?
I believe it was in the packet. Let me see if I
I'm
can
sorry.
pull it up. I didn't pull the whole building permit, but I did include one page in there. I didn't. Maybe it's the other direction. Here it is. Okay, give me a quick second here to screen share. All right, Kathy, are you able? Let's give it another second.
Oh, okay.
Okay, and then let me back up a little bit more. Okay, are you able to see this page here?
Yes.
So what I think they did is they actually created a wraparound porch that didn't previously exist. And so based on that, I would suspect that the 7 columns were approved at that time. So I don't.
And added, maybe, not.
Correct. I do.
Okay.
I suspect that's true. When I wrote the staff report, it wasn't clear which columns, if any, were being left out. So we made the assumption that all the material would be historic, or at least portions of it. So it is possible to determine that no historic material is being replaced at this time.
But I think we need a little more information from the applicant to get there.
Yeah, it is. Yep. I would assume that, but again, there is room for more evidence.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I want to follow up that. So it is possible that the application, at least the columns, do not deal with historic materials because it's from a later period.
That is possible. Let me screen share a different photo here. Bear with me.
In which case it wouldn't undergo historic review by this commission.
Correct, yes. At least in the way I understand the code, you guys are able to make different determinations and interpretations. So if everybody can see this old photo of the house in black and white, Kathy, confirm?
Okay, yes, yes.
Okay. So based on this image, again, we don't have a different view from another vantage point, but it does not appear that there is an additional wraparound porch. It appears that the 2 columns at the front are the original, and then that there's no further porch.
Also, you'll note that the handrail is completely different now and probably raised up. It looks like they kept the dowels there in place, but they did a higher handrail to maybe get the height of the handrail up.
Yep, and they had mentioned that, I believe, in the letter they wrote to Roz.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are a couple differences. I can scroll to a different
And
photo.
these are the 2 columns that are proposed to remain.
That's correct, yeah. That's my understanding. We do have the ability to ask the applicant to confirm that these 2 in the very front are the ones that are remaining. And if so, based on what I'm seeing, I would think that those are the 2 historic columns. But again, that is up to you to determine today.
It looks like from this photo that the capitals are different.
I can try to zoom in, but it isn't CSI.
Oh, it's hard to tell.
It's a little hard to tell.
But it looks like they're a little different. They're
Yeah, they
pretty
could
close.
be. I can, looks like
Oh, and
maybe
the bases look different
base are
too.
different too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we can conclude that those columns that are being replaced are not actually historic fabric.
I would encourage you to deliberate about that when you guys close the hearing, if you choose to do that.
Well, I don't know what else to conclude.
So,
Yes, Chad.
If we have no further questions for staff, I will probably move us along to the next step, but let me just double check. All right.
Kathy?
Nope.
Does anyone have any procedural questions they wish to raise at this time? In the absence of that, I will declare this public hearing closed at 6:35. Does the commission wish to deliberate on this case?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Please deliberate. We'll start over here with Bill.
I was afraid of that. Well, that's a dilemma. It looks pretty clearly from that photograph and from that permit that that side porch was added on later, within, not within 50 years or whatever. It's a difficult argument to make that they would have to worry about replacing those if indeed they're not historic fabric from the period of the building. So I'm not sure how to proceed.
In my mind, I think we have two directions we could go with this. I think that we could have a continuance where we could verify that the two front columns are not being replaced. It sounds like that's still up in the air. We could also find that this is a staff level decision, given that we're not making a decision on historic features.
We can just say that those front two ones, I mean, it's pretty clear that the front two ones, we can reliably say those are original and that we'd want to repair those or restore those, but it would be hard to make that argument going around the corner.
It would not surprise me that the original columns have lasted better given the quality of the materials they would have been constructed with originally and the quality of the paint that would have shielded them. Kathy?
Yes, I'm wondering if we have a route to refer it back to staff to get the information and verify that the front columns are the only ones that are historic and are not being replaced. And if that's the case, let it be a staff level decision. It seems like the applicant might get an answer sooner than coming back to landmarks. I'm also not opposed to coming back to landmarks with the additional information the applicant agreed to provide. I could go either way.
Cameron?
Yeah, so this is interesting. The two columns in the front, I heard the applicant say those two columns, the ones that show up on page 15, the historic survey photo, are staying there. So the two original columns, and those are character defining features. So that's like a big deal to me. Those are staying. The other 7 are the ones that were from 1997, and they're not historic material from what I've heard tonight. Having said all that, if you look at the review criteria, the review criteria still applies because it's still a exterior alteration on a historic house, even though it's not part of the original historic structure. It's still a historic exterior alteration, and it's still a request for use of substitute materials on a historic house. So as I read the code, it still applies. Now, it's not quite as tight because it's not one of the character defining features. So I'm not quite as worried about looking at it as intensely as I would if it was one of those two original columns. So where I'm at is I would still like to see more information from the applicant that it either meets or does not meet the review criteria in the code. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Mason?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and I think it goes to show why Albany is such a fascinating town. You know, it's kind of a collage of different pieces of material from different histories put on top of each other. I really like how Kathy phrased it with the either or. I'm comfortable with that as well. I think, given that these two columns, well, as I heard, remain, I'm comfortable kicking it back to a staff decision. However, Also, given that the applicant has stated they are willing to come back with further evidence, I'm also open to it being a landmarks decision. I think, though, that the applicant would probably get a quicker decision if it's a staff one.
Richard?
It is a bepuzzlement and not, perhaps fortunately, I don't think it's a critical issue, but I would like to see information from the applicant if it's available. I agree with Kathy that it could go. Who makes the decision? Glad that the applicant did clarify several points there that I'd wondered about, including the one about, are those replacement fiberglass columns really able to support? Tell us there is something inside there. And that was somewhat reassuring. If the two apparently original, or at least existing when the property was placed in the district, if those are still remaining, it becomes a kind of different question about.
So I'd like to follow up on what Richard just said and also what Cameron said. It concerns me. I mean, it sort of surprises me, but not really, that if what we think is true is that those front columns are probably 80 years or 100 years older than those side columns. And let's all take into consideration that in, 25 years, they've already degraded to the point where it looks like to the homeowner that it might be a structural issue. I don't doubt what we've been told. I'm not, cross-examining our witness here. I think that it may not be surprising that those columns have degraded rapidly in comparison, and it makes me hesitant to go to a great length to have him keep those if what I'm having him keep is a material that would lead to further degradation of the building. So it's a weird position to be in. I'm more inclined to say, okay, replace them with fiberglass. They're on the side of the building. The ones that were there are falling apart, apparently. I mean, you can take photographs and show us, but anyone, and a lot of us have history with historic buildings, we know how quickly things, once you lose that paint material and it starts to degrade, it's very difficult to, you might think you have it repaired and it can still happen. Columns are a little notorious for being, well, you said they're solid. I think they're probably 4-piece with a hollow center, and you get a leak down the middle of it and you don't necessarily see it. So I'm not sure how far on a limb I want to go for a column that may not be very structural or period specific.
Yes.
Can I provide 2 pieces of feedback? Number one, you guys are able to actually approve a staff level decision tonight. That is something that you can do as a hearings body. So if that's the direction you're going to go, you would be able to just approve using that criteria. And number 2, if you are concerned about making sure that the front 2 columns stay, you can also propose a criteria that those 2 are not to be replaced. Conditions, sorry, not criteria, the other C word. So that's all I've got for you based on what I'm kind of hearing from you guys and where you guys are going. So hopefully that's
I like
helpful.
that. I like what Alyssa's saying. I think keep
I-
go ahead.
I could make a motion for discussion if we're ready.
Yes, please, Kathy.
And I don't have that handy dandy cheat sheet in front of me, but I would move that the project be referred back to staff for approval with the condition that the front 2 columns not be altered with this project, and that additional information be provided prior to approval that substantiates the 7 columns being proposed for change were installed in 1997.
I think it's quite clear that they were installed in.
I'll second.
Was that just a motion for discussion so let's,
Yes.
before we second it, I think we got to hammer out the language.
Yeah,
Kathy, to confirm, that was just a motion for discussion?
it was. I was trying to collect my thoughts, and with the goal of getting additional information that staff would need to make the approval that the applicant has agreed to provide, and conditioning no changes to the front 2 columns, the original columns.
So would someone like to read off of the motion, all the legal stuff that she left out? I think I can see it. I move to approve the exterior alterations and use of substitute materials, including conditions of approval as noted in the staff report for application planning file number HI 2524. This motion is based on the findings and conclusions in the January 8th, 2025 staff report. In addition, the conditions I move are to ensure that the front columns remain on the building and are repaired as necessary, and that the side columns are, in as much as possible, determined to be from the late 90s, in which case they could be replaced. Is that close enough?
And I thought the original idea was to move it back to staff, not do an approval.
I forgot to put that in there. You want to give it a shot? I move to approve the exterior alterations and use the substitute materials, including conditions of approval as noted in the staff report for planning file HI 2524. I also move that this matter be reprimanded or remanded back to staff to determine that, number 1, the front 2 columns, being of historic in nature, are not replaced but repaired in place, and that to the staff's satisfaction, the side columns are determined to be from the late 1990 record. And all the conclusions in this January 8th, 2025 meeting, staff report and findings in support of the application made by the Landmarks Commission during deliberations on this matter.
I think I'm reading the room a little bit and thinking that maybe that's staff isn't.
I mean,
do we need to, is
to-
it perhaps that we need to move not for an approval, but move to remand this with conditions that the front 2 columns stay?
Well, let her respond.
So what I think you could do today is that the commission determines that to your satisfaction, you determine based on the evidence that the columns were installed in 1997, you don't need to remand to staff. You could make a final decision today. And if as part of that final decision, you include that condition that the front 2 not be replaced, that's an option. It is faster. I mean, I will write the decision either way. But if you guys feel that to your satisfaction, the columns are from 97, then you could make a decision now and we don't have to remand. That may be a point of discussion though.
Yeah, it seems like the dilemma I'm facing is that, okay, let's assume we determine that they're from 1997. So then the question is it better to replace them with a material that's not going to decay, or is it better to try to repair the ones from 1997? As Cameron mentioned, it is true that even though it didn't get historic approval, it was an addition to a historic building. So there is sort of 2 avenues we could go.
Yeah, I mean, as I read the code, the development code still applies, even though the columns that we're talking about are not original historic fabric. It's still an appearance change to a historic house. And so as I read the code, the development code still applies.
Okay,
I don't know how much of an appearance change it is. I mean, we can't even tell from looking at the photographs, so it's not a big appearance change. It's
Particularly if those 7 columns that are earmarked are already differentiated from the 2 original ones.
Kathy?
I'm gonna make a motion to continue the item to provide the additional information discussed by that the applicant would provide to assure that the front 2 columns are not going to be altered or replaced, and to provide clarity in the record as to the alterations made in 1997 and the condition of those 4 columns, those 7 non-historic columns.
Could we add also the cost for using substitute materials versus wood?
Yes, I would be happy to add that. Yes.
So procedurally, here's what will need to happen. If you decide to continue the hearing, you've got to reopen the public hearing first, like if you're going in that direction. And then we would have the hearing continue to a date and time certain. It would not need to be re-advertised, but we do have to reopen the hearing in order to continue it.
yeah,
For me, as chair, I can't and won't make a motion, but for me, I am fully satisfied by the photographic evidence that the 7 columns are not historic material. And I am satisfied with the proposed alterations, and I would be satisfied if the front 2 were left as they are with minimal repair. And I see that remanding it to staff with those conditions as being an expedient way to handle this, but I am open to what the commission decides.
I think I'm in agreement. So when Cameron's asked for the additional step that we didn't really talk about, of the applicant then providing us cost data. And so I'm just a little often, because I've done this so much professionally, it's very difficult to find exact replicas for anything these days. And it's virtually impossible. I mean, you can't replace a 100-year-old column with anything made today. It's not realistic.
Well, Bill, there was no second for that motion, so I think we need to keep working on a motion that will get a second at least.
I'll second your motion.
Can we restate that motion? It's kind of all over the place.
Yeah.
The motion was to continue the item for the applicant to provide the information described in his testimony, in addition to some basic cost estimates on material type.
So we can't make a motion to continue it. We have to open it back up and then continue it. But we can. See in a face. Yes.
I feel like we at least need to know if we're going to continue the motion, if you're going to open the record.
Well,
you could take a
That's
straw
what I'm about
poll.
to ask, is
Okay.
Can we have let's have a vote, an oral vote on who wants to reopen and have a continuance, and who feels comfortable making a motion. Or let's just that. Do we want to reopen? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So there was no second on the motion to approve it.
Well, Kathy, we can't make a motion. We have to reopen it.
I understand that, so, but there was a motion to approve it and there was no second. So that's why I would be in favor of what you just said. I agree with what you said, but there was no second for that motion, which is why I made a motion to continue it, not realizing we had to reopen the hearing.
Well, reopening the hearing is the normal process for a continuance.
Yes. Yeah.
Let me just finish up that quick vote real quick. All those who do not want to reopen and are not looking for a continuance, Aye.
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 I said aye.
Is that in favor, Richard? Okay, so I think we're not looking for continuance at that point. So now we're looking for a motion again.
I'm interested in what the difference is between kicking it back to staff versus us approving the proposal with the condition that those two front columns are not replaced. And if any work is done on them, that would be a new application to landmarks, and then that would need to undergo, historic review and review of substitute material.
So I don't think it would necessarily have to be a new application. Staff would just make the decision on everything except we would be inserting the condition that the front two columns.
I like that.
Well, I think the issue is if we put in there something that more information has to come in, then we've added something onto the record and we have to reopen it in order, if we're asking for new information, I mean, whether it's in landmarks or any other committee, it's going to require an opening of the record.
All right. So to provide some procedural information, if you want to have staff review, you have to determine that the substitute materials do not apply. So substitute materials are automatically a landmarks review. I think there is room for you to determine that you do not have to review for substitute materials. What I'm basing that on is the purpose statement, and that is in ADC 7.170. The first sentence is, the purpose of reviewing the use of substitute materials is to encourage the preservation of characteristics and material of the historic architecture style. To me, that implies that we're only reviewing for historic material. As the decision maker, that final determination is up to you. So if you want to determine that there's no need for historic review of substitute material, that is an option for you. Again, you're the decision maker. And then from there, if you determine there's no need for substitute materials, at that point, you're just reviewing for exterior alterations. My recommendation would be is that even if it was a staff level review, under those criteria, technically you could still approve it. If you send it back down to staff, that means it means that the decision continues longer. So it's more days, it's more time. If you feel there's enough in the record for you to approve, you can approve based on kind of everything in there. Does anybody have any questions? I know that might have been a little much.
I agree with Cameron that it seems appropriate that we would review the substitute materials, even though it's likely that we would not hold it to the same standard because those particular columns are not historic, but they are I wasn't quite convinced, Alyssa, that we don't still need to review the fact that substitute materials are going to be placed on a contributing resource in the district. We could find that it's appropriate and that it meets the criteria and that it can be approved, but I don't know that I'm comfortable saying it doesn't have to be reviewed.
I have something to bring up here too, that if it's remanded to staff to review and approve on appeal, it comes back to you. Just so you know, to be aware of that.
Yeah, I don't know what to think. It's a rather straightforward project. I mean, I guess we're quibbling over whether it's painted fiberglass or painted wood, and I don't know you could determine that without going up and thumping on it. And if this was something done in the 1990s, I mean, I do kind of want to work with the neighbors and be a little bit sympathetic to how much it costs to keep these buildings functioning. I mean, I feel like we're getting kind of altruistic here.
So I would say that if maybe to reframe this a different way, if we did not have the quagmire of which columns and when they were installed, from where I'm sitting, I think it is likely that we would make a decision to approve these columns, these fiberglass columns. So are we splitting hairs on the semantics, but we're going to arrive at the same endpoint anyway?
I would technically still need more information from the applicant to make sure it met the code.
Okay. And what information in particular would help us with that decision?
The condition of all 7 of those columns and the cost of original materials versus substitute materials.
I'm personally satisfied with the evidence the applicant has submitted with the photo evidence. That's where I stand there.
It seems, from my perspective, it seems that the most straightforward step is indeed to do a continuance and request that the applicant bring in additional information. Have a clearer path forward from that. Realize that that does delay things. And I don't like to delay things, but considering the bumps and grinds here, maybe the most straightforward approach.
So do we need LiDAR or X-ray? How are we going to determine? I mean, maybe it's because I'm an architect and an engineer, but really, you're going to determine whether these things are structurally stable. And if we require that and they fall down, are we liable? I mean, at some point you have to sort of, they came before us and said, we're not touching those front ones. Those are great. These back ones are crap. We got to move them. And the contractor's giving them that advice. So if we want to wade in and say, oh, no, we think they're great, then do you realize that that puts the responsibility on us? If there's a structural failure, it just literally does if we overrule them.
All we're doing is asking for more information, so I'm not sure.
But how's that going to help you determine whether they are in fact structurally? You can't always tell from looking at them visually.
Now, that may not be the determination, but at least we will feel that we have followed, as Cameron has pointed out, the actual instructions that are specified. That gives clarity to both us and to the applicant that we've done our due diligence. And
during the public hearing, there were questions of the applicant that he didn't have the answer, and he was more than happy to do a little more research and provide that information.
That's right.
I believe the chair asked him if he would be okay with the continuance, and I believe the answer was yes, in order to pull everything together.
That's Kathy's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'm certainly open to that. We took a straw poll and it looked like that was not the direction we wanted to go. So let's reopen the hearing.
If we reopen the hearing, then that means that the applicant gets to then weigh in on anything we said. We can ask him more questions, right?
Well,
We could,
Hearing.
although I think we mostly were
Well,
asking for him to
if
come
we
back.
reopen the hearing, I want to ask as a member of this board, I'd like to ask the applicant more questions.
All right.
Well, we could reopen it now, or we can just ask for a continuance and reopen the hearing, because the hearing's then left open during the continuance, so it comes back to us.
As long as you reopen the hearing now, then it would stay open until February 5th when you meet again.
I'm just looking for my spot here. I call to order this quasi-judicial public hearing at 7:04.
So hearing is reopened.
It is reopened.
I would like, I request the chairman that we call up the applicant so I can ask him a couple questions.
As a point of order, you're also going to have to allow Bernadette or anybody else who's an interested party a chance to testify too.
Yeah,
Okay.
sure. Of course.
Come on up. He doesn't need to restate.
No,
Okay.
we got him.
All right. So my question is pretty simple. You've heard us talking. So do you have a problem with getting some more information on those columns and taking more photographs of them and coming back to us in a month's time
It's 2
before you get
weeks.
approval? 2 months,
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh, but when,
February 5th would be your next meeting.
oh, that's right.
Yes, we're
We're in the
good.
middle of the
We've,
month.
we've lost a couple weeks. Sure.
Yes.
I can certainly do that. And as a final confirmation, the 2 columns out front that have been in question, we will not be touching.
Are you clear on the information that the commissioners feel they need?
My understanding is that the 2 main points that we're looking for are essentially a cost analysis of historic materials as opposed to the replacement materials being fiberglass. It's the first point that I'm hearing, and the second point being kind of that confirmation on the 2 out front. Were there other points
I
that need
think,
to be
Cameron,
addressed?
you wanted more information on the condition.
So the things I'm looking for is evidence that all of the 7 columns in question are deteriorated beyond repair.
Okay.
And then that it's cost prohibitive to use replacement wood versus the substitute materials. I'm looking for evidence of those 2 items.
So can I ask what cost prohibitive would mean in your opinion? Is there a limit?
That's a good question, and that's always up for debate.
Well, you're bringing it up,
I don't have
so-
a predefined amount.
$1,000 a column, $500 a column? What's cost prohibitive?
I don't have an amount. It depends on the situation and what the applicant says. I'm not
And
gonna
you
be
take
baited
into
an answer
consideration
right
that
now.
these aren't historic materials to begin with.
Yeah, I take that into consideration, absolutely.
How about we ask him for a cost breakdown and then policy decisions can be made by the commission?
I think that's what they're asking for.
Yeah, that's basically, I'm just pointing it out. That's what it comes down to.
Now, Kathy, Richard, Mason, are there other items of information that you guys need?
I'm good.
I have one more question.
Satisfied.
So let's say that 3 out of the 4 columns are vastly deteriorated, and we'd like to replace those, but we can't replace them exactly. So now we have 3 different kinds of columns on the building, because you're not going to be able to find a perfect replacement for something done in
I have the same concern. I think we're straying into deliberation.
well.
So
I just want to
I'm
make
trying box
it
up.
clear. So if we go down this road, we ask him to come back with information. The point of that isn't just because I want to hear more information. It's actually to make a decision. And if it determines that, well, 3 of these columns are okay and 4 of them aren't, then the end result of that is that we have 3 different kind of columns.
So I think another way to state that is we are looking for perhaps a more clear demonstration. Although I'm satisfied with the illustrations, I think the other commissioners are looking for maybe a little more verification about the differences and where the bead is, what exactly the cap and base difference is, because if these columns or any other replacement, wood or fiberglass, are very different, and we find only 3 of the 7 newer columns are beyond repair, then there's going to be a big aesthetic issue there. So we'll probably need that information.
I have a question for the applicant. Do you think that you'd be able to get that information without actually breaking into the columns?
The information specific to the profile of the column or the
And
structural
detailing
integrity?
the structural integrity and detailing what we're looking for? I remember you mentioned that you would have to do some invasive stuff possibly to get that information.
Yes, I think that we could submit more thorough pictures, maybe measurements of the gaps that are forming at the base of columns. But to get really into it, I think would be invasive and potentially damaging to what's existing.
I think that additional photo documentation is what we're looking for each column that is going to be replaced. I don't think we're looking for you to open up the column to document the interior of it. I think there's not enough information with the application because all 7 columns that are proposed for replacement are not photo documented. And that, I think, is what we need to have. And I don't think that's a big deal. I think the material can be submitted to staff right away, the additional material that we're asking for, and we can get it on the February 5th agenda. And then there won't be any questions about the condition of the columns that are being replaced, which columns are being replaced, the cost for the materials, and the application then would be complete, and our decision would be based on all of the facts that are available.
I have another question for the applicant. How different in terms of decay do you think these other columns are from the one that you've given us on page 23? Or would all these images look kind of like that one?
I think they're very similar. We used that one picture in particular because it was a fair example of the condition of all 7. But we would be happy to submit more photo evidence if that's requested.
Any further questions for the applicant?
I'm good.
Do we have any public rebuttal? Thank you. Appreciate it. Any public rebuttal or testimony?
It does not appear so at this time.
Okay. Does staff wish to respond to anything?
Nope, I'm good.
Well, remind me, we just
So
move
for the
on?
continuance, we would just have you indicate that this public hearing has been continued to Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 at 6 p.m.
Okay. Public hearing has been continued to Wednesday, February 5th,
6 p.m.
6 p.m.
Quick, we don't vote on that?
No.
The hearing is still open, so
Yeah.
there's been reopened and it'll stay open until that next meeting.
But we don't need a motion.
No.
Who made the decision?
We're basically not doing anything.
You're not making a final decision. You're just,
Just postponing your decision until the next meeting.
Can we move back to deliberation?
No. We have to leave it open. We can't deliberate during the hearing. So we are going to resume next meeting in this exact spot.
When did we decide that?
The
We
legal
talked about
issue.
it.
Yeah, I think technically Robert's Rules of Orders would say that Mason's absolutely right. If we're going to reopen the hearing, it would take a vote. You can't just unilaterally decide. Oh, hey,
okay,
I'm
so
gonna
we
reopen.
are guided but not bound by Robert's Rules of Order. We have, I think at this point, made a decision, and I think we're moving on.
And
Well,
whether the chair
I'm
liked it or
good.
not,
I'm
we
good,
decided.
but I think Mason's right.
I'm just confused. Who made that decision?
We did.
But I didn't vote.
We don't have to vote to, I asked if we wanted to, and everyone nodded their head.
But the record will show that
It's a process error if we don't. I bet lunch.
Again, we're guided by Robert's Rules of Order. We're not bound. Secondarily, process orders can be fixed by any appeal of this decision goes to City Council, and your process errors are cured when you have another de novo hearing. Again, we're bound, but people have an option. They've testified. A lot of the things that Luba is looking for is, did you provide notice? Did you take in testimony?
Yeah, I mean, I
This
think the issue
procedural
here
issue
that
is not enough
Mason's-
to overturn a decision. I understand what you're saying. We are guided only. We are not bound.
I don't have a problem. I think Mason still wants to talk about it and that he's not okay with not talking about it anymore. Is that right?
Yeah, and also I don't want the record to show that I would vote for a continuance.
The record doesn't show that you voted for a continuance. You voted to reopen the meeting, which is de
So if-
facto.
Did we vote on that?
Yes.
If the meeting, well, I don't remember us voting on that, but if the meeting is open and Mason wants to keep asking questions, then how do we shut it down without another vote?
Well, we can't deliberate now that we've reopened it. And I realize that maybe people didn't realize we were reopening it, but I looked around the room for head nods to see if we were going to reopen this,
Oh, okay.
and that's what I received.
Yep.
It did
Okay.
not require an oral vote to reopen it.
What?
I didn't even want to do it.
I'm just,
You know, if you need to, you can always reopen well, no, it is open right now.
It's open.
So
The meeting is open, so we can continue.
Yeah, close it and then reopen.
So we are closing it to deliberate over what?
Sure.
Okay. Have I done everything I need to do to close it?
Indicate that you're closing the public hearing at such and such a time.
Okay, I will now close this public hearing at 7:16 PM. We can deliberate.
All right, go Mason.
well, I find that the columns are in a state of decay as sufficiently described in the photo evidence. The applicant said that all other sub and columns are like this. I'm not sure what getting more photograph evidence would do except just substantiate what we already see here. I mean, I can see a gap between the base and the floor of this column, and testimony from the applicant confirms that the other sub and columns are in this state of decay. Additionally, it's confirmed that the other point is that the proposed replacements I find match very similarly the current style and characteristics of these columns that are from the 90s, therefore questionably if they're even historic. And then also I find that keeping those two front ones is retaining the historic character of this building.
Does it not occur to you that that picture is of one of those two columns?
Correct, and as the applicant stated. Oh, so I actually don't, that's a good question. I believe that this column is actually a column in the back of the building.
Yes.
This is not a column that is remaining, but rather a column that will be replaced. So what we are
I
seeing.
question that, but I don't know that my questioning it is that important.
Yeah, I can see the outbuilding. So on the back, in the background of this photograph, you see an outbuilding. And on page,
So there is another staircase from that porch.
on page,
Yeah, I think that's right. I think there's another stair at the back.
so this column, I don't question the authenticity of this column because this column is an image of a column that will be replaced. It's not one of the two that's going to remain.
Okay.
With those three things said, I feel comfortable making a motion and voting.
And
Okay,
Ma-
I move to approve the exterior alterations and use of substitute materials, including conditions of approval as noted in the staff report for applicant planning file number HI 2524. This motion is based on the finding and conclusions in the January 8th, 2025 staff report and findings in support of the application made by the Landmarks Commission during deliberation on this matter.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
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 No.
Well, it's a tie, right?
It's a 3-3 tie. Could we get a roll call vote on that, please? Just for the record.
Okay. Ingman,
How do I vote?
are you in favor
Aye
or
doesn't-
against?
In favor of the motion.
I am not in favor of the motion.
Cox,
I am in favor of my motion.
Settlemyer,
I am not in favor of the motion.
Robinson,
I am in favor of the motion.
I am in favor of the motion.
Kathy?
Not in favor.
It's 3-3.
So it didn't pass.
The motion fails.
I make a motion that we reopen the hearing and have a continuance for more information from the applicant.
Second.
So again, I'm not trying to be that guy, but we can't make a motion to reopen the hearing. We have to just decide that unfortunately.
How about we take a straw poll about who's in favor of reopening the meeting with the express intent of continuing it to February 5th?
So move.
Mason?
I don't know where we are.
I'm not
I honestly have been at this for 20 years and never been in this situation.
So-
Every time I've opened or closed a hearing, it has taken a vote. It's never been, oh, gee, let's put our fingers up in the air. What is wrong with Cameron's motion? It's been moved and seconded.
So the hearing, if you reopen it, is not done. To make a motion is to finish. And we are not finishing this hearing, you are continuing it to a date certain. So procedurally, we're not taking a vote, we're just reopening the meeting and continuing.
I remember previously voting on a motion to continue an item to a date certain. I can't tell you what hearing it was, but it was within the last year. There was a motion to continue an item, I believe, that
I
we,
have that same recollection.
I think it was another informal straw poll to move back to reopen, but what we are being told now from staff is that is not how we do it. So
What's the problem with reopening the hearing?
there is no problem. We're just trying to decide and get back to it. We closed it because we didn't have a vote on it.
Right.
But what I was trying to articulate the first time is the staff is now indicating that we don't make a motion and we don't vote to do that. We have to decide to do that.
Yeah, that's how we decide. We make a motion, we vote.
And that's why we did the straw poll twice.
But straw poll is not a vote.
Correct.
And so it's not a decision. And what's wrong? I mean, what's the downside? What's going to happen to us if Cameron makes the motion, Kathy seconded it, we can vote whether to open the hearing or not.
I'm just trying to
Let's
follow
vote,
whether-
and everybody promises to come to the CAG training that we're gonna have next month.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Go ahead and vote if you want.
Okay.
And come to the CAG training next month.
Because I will make sure they cover this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe we're wrong, maybe you guys are right. We'll make sure they cover it.
I'm only 70 years old, but I've never figured this out.
We will start on this side of the room. Actually, let's start online with Kathy.
I vote in favor of Cameron's motion, if that's what we're doing.
Yes.
Yes, I vote in favor of Cameron's motion.
Nay.
Nay.
Are we calling out by name or? Okay, I'm voting aye.
Nay.
Nay.
So that's 4 nays, it sounds like. Can we have another roll call vote just to be sure?
Yes.
Kathy,
In favor of reopening and continuing.
Riles,
Opposed to reopening.
Robinson,
Opposed.
Settlemyre,
Favor?
Cox,
Opposed.
Favor?
3-3 again.
The motion fails, right?
Do we want to take a 5-minute recess to just think in our own thoughts?
I don't need one. but-
So we're still in deliberation. That's all.
I'm interested, Rich, in so the image that you were talking about when you thought it was the front column, does that change your thinking there? Or is it still that's a front?
If it is the one on the front porch,
Okay, got it. And so you're not,
but I'm convinced that it's not now.
you're convinced that okay.
You convinced me.
Oh, got it. Thank you. And the reason why I realize that is because on page 13, there's a picture, an image of all of the property, and you can see that in the back, there is a little back building. And so that's what that one is. I find the image on 23 and the testimony from the applicant sufficient.
I concur with you.
I don't know what getting more images will do, except further the applicant's argument. I trust that the applicant here is being honorable and not, the other 6 columns aren't in a perfect state, and, this one was. I don't think that's what's going on here.
I concur with you. I think that it is often hard to portray in a photograph that could potentially be brought back to us exactly what the level of decay is. Something can have a glossy coat of paint and be structurally insolvent. It could be problematic. I don't know that. I think we could be convinced either way of something that's untrue. I don't think that information is necessary for me to make a decision, as evidenced by my concurrent vote with your prior motion.
Yeah, I agree with
Mr.
what-
Chair, I'm willing, I will change my vote. If someone can make a motion that includes a condition that the front columns not be altered, but we need to get a grasp on whether or not we're getting complete applications submitted. I agree. This is not, rocket science on this project right now. Those 7 columns were put in 97. They're not historic. The front columns they're being preserved. The porch was already altered substantially. But why can't we get complete applications that provide all the information? We've got an applicant who was more than willing. Oh yeah, I can get more information. Sure, I can provide that. I can't answer that question tonight at the hearing, but I'm happy to bring back more information. So I'm going to change my vote to move this along. But I would like us to get more complete information and more complete applications before we make decisions. I don't have any question that everything the applicant said was true. I don't question that. I at all. And I don't question that the 1997 columns are not historic fabric, and the replacement with substitute materials would not be a substantial alteration, and it would be considered consistent with the standards. But again, we need to get complete applications because we're making quasi-judicial decisions for the city of Albany without complete information. So I don't have the cheat sheet in front of me, so I'm not going to try a motion. But the motion to approve, I will support as long as it includes no alteration of any kind to the front two historic columns.
And I absolutely concur with that.
Yeah, and I appreciate what Kathy's just said there. It's my frustration too over the years that we seldom get complete applications. If every time we get an incomplete application, we're telling people, well, we don't quite believe you, go back and do it again. I mean,
That's a question.
Bill, what does it have to
This
do
is
with
a lot.
believing someone? It's not believing someone. It's submitting materials that are required to a public agency for an approval. It's not believing someone.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's not about not believing someone. The applicant says, I don't know. I can get you that information. He said that several times. And that's all I'm asking for is that information. Not that I don't believe him. He just said, yeah, I need to get you the information. That's all.
But I would also clarify that some of the commissioners feel they have enough information tonight.
Then make a motion and let's see how it
I
goes.
move to approve the exterior alterations and use of substitute materials, including conditions of approval as noted in the staff report, and also that the two columns in the front and the original two are not altered for application planning file number H1 2524. This motion is based on the finding and conclusions in the January 8th, 2025 staff report and findings in support of the application made by the Landmarks Commission during deliberations on this matter.
second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 I
All those opposed, same sign.
Aye.
All right. I don't even know where I'm at here.
You are in Albany, Oregon.
Decisions of the Landmarks Commission may be appealed to the City Council within 10 days of the date the notice of decision is mailed. Business from the commission. I'll start on this side of the room.
Nothing yet.
Cameron?
So not for this meeting, but Preservation Month is coming up. So we should be thinking about ideas to bring to our next meeting in February.
I'm learning a lot. Thank you all.
Actually, I do have something to, on the 27th of this month, I'm getting a hip replacement and I will be convalescing during the time of our next meeting and probably not able to attend. I'll try to, if possible, I'll attend virtually, but I may not be able to make it depending on how I'm feeling after the surgery.
Good luck.
Yeah,
Thank
best
you.
luck there.
Richard?
Well, I blurted a bit there, but I am puzzled that applications come to us that do not seem to me to be vetted by.
We will have a conversation about this.
Pardon?
At the business and staff, we'll have a conversation about this.
Okay.
Kathy?
Nothing tonight. Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing further from the commission, we'll move on to staff updates.
So, complete applications. Couple of things. Our historic preservation planner strives to get more and more information out of applicants when they come in. We deal with applicants of varying levels of professionalism or ability on how to apply. You know, sometimes we get site plans that are done in pen. It's very, very difficult. And in many cases, we ask for more information and they don't want to provide it. And so I think it's wrong to point to staff as far as complete applications. Each application comes in and it should be reviewed on its own merits. And the applicant should be their own best advocate. If they think that there's something that they should have submitted, they can come in and testify to that effect. But I can assure you that staff reaches out and does all of their level best to get good, complete applications, and we just don't always get them.
Well, I can accept that. I understand that it's not easy. There certainly are people out there who are intimidated by, and many other obstacles are there, which are not yours to, have to fix.
Do a lot of hand holding.
So, okay.
Well, and I mean, I just want to thank staff for all the work that you all really do put in. I mean, I see you all in this building sometimes well past 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock. And yeah, if I ever gave the impression that I was, saying that staff wasn't doing their best, that was not my intention at all. And I also don't know if that's what the commission was intending for.
No.
No, that was not my intent at all by what I stated about complete applications. David, is there language in the code that requires applications be submitted, complete applications be submitted?
The definition of a complete application is very vague, and
Okay.
fortunately, the policy of our department is if you meet the letter of the application, that is what is necessary to deem it complete. I do provide them guidance about what I think will make them more successful here in front of you guys. A lot of times they are unwilling. They think I am being too strict, or they think I am blowing things out of proportion. And in my personal opinion, this may not be what they are trying to say, but in my personal opinion, they believe that I am asking them for more than you guys actually want to see. So people, I feel, do not take me seriously when I give them recommendations. I am trying. I really wish I could bring you something better. Maybe in this one, I could have reached out more. He was very willing to give it. But honestly, I did think that there were parts of things that were enough, especially given what I usually get from applicants. To be honest with you.
I'm wondering if we could, I wonder if we could do a very short, focused workshop on application materials and let commissioners, and maybe something could come of that, a one-page best tips for completing your application and getting through the hearing quickly kind of guidance. I don't know, maybe you already have that.
What may be helpful is if you guys are willing to put together a simple one-page worksheet of what you guys would like, and we can say it's from the Landmark Commission. Maybe hearing it's coming from you guys versus from staff would be helpful. I'm kind of out of ideas at this point for what they want from me.
Here's another perspective. I've done dozens of these over the years. I do very careful and complete applications. Do you know how much that costs? It probably costs more to give a complete application on this than it costs them to do it. Do you realize what you're asking? It's difficult.
To be fair, half the time what we are asking for is just more photos. I am not asking them to address all the criteria to a high degree of certainty, but a lot of times what you guys are stuck on is the photographic evidence and the actual images of what they want to duplicate. And that is something that they can provide.
Yeah, but I go beyond that in my applications, and I think that's the definition of a complete application. I do structural integrity tests, and I really get into it and determine window by window by window which ones are.
Bill, that might be
comfortable
for a
and which are
building
not.
permit. Bill, that might be for a building permit. We're not talking about building permits. We're talking about,
I'm
the
talking about
discretionary
land- I'm talking about-
permit that comes before the building permit is developed. So I appreciate that, Alyssa, and I think that we probably could come up with a few examples of things we like to see. And it is mostly just additional documentation, photo documentation, and that, that tricky cost estimate issue that is in the code. So we need to not forget about that.
Remember our last meeting and the quality of the application that was submitted and the fact that the applicant didn't even show up? That's the kind of thing that we get.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I concur 100%. I think that it is not a bad idea. It is a good idea for us to prepare a worksheet with pointers of what would be helpful to us to make our decision, which in turn helps the applicant with a speedy and accurate decision. But I do understand what staff is saying. It's reality on reality's terms as somebody who works with this segment of the public, the builders and the remodelers, and really it's not just our industry, but you do not always get what you ask for, and we are free to decide whether we have enough information or not, and we should not feel bad when they fall short with the information, and we cannot make the decision. But sometimes we all have differences of opinions about whether we have enough information. That's not saying this application was good or bad or adequate or inadequate. I just think that sometimes we have a difference of opinion on what we can move forward on pragmatically, just to keep going forward in the best interest of everyone, all the stakeholders, whether that's the applicant or our historic districts.
And I also just want to remember like equity. I mean, what David said about sometimes we get site plans where it's a pen and paper. Perhaps the person cannot afford. What just happened to my chair? All right. But I mean, Albany is a very diverse community. The city code represents, I mean, they are a stakeholder as well in the city code. They live in the city. And so I like the idea of having like I mean, we have cheat sheets. Our applicants also maybe should have a cheat sheet where it's like, okay, if we see this and if you have this and blah, 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 then it might guarantee that your application will fly through the commission. But having it listed in the sense that it's like, these are the things that are required. And I know that I don't think that I'm not getting the impression anyone's saying this on the commission, might be a little unequitable and leave people out who live in the historic districts and who would meet all of the criteria listed in the development code, but simply do not submit their application, or maybe just modify their buildings without submitting an application because the process would be unequitable.
Thank you. I agree with that. And I will endeavor to bring a few items, or maybe we'll see what I come up with, but I would encourage anyone who's interested to maybe bring some things back to the next meeting that they would like to see on a handout that could give pointers on how your commission can help you, what information we need to be able to help you.
So with that, I would like to make sure, so just to remember, the ones that we usually see are exterior alterations, use of substitute material, and new construction. So if you can think about kind of the ones we've seen lately and what you would have wanted to see with those applications. I know that we see a lot of exterior alterations and use of substitute materials, but we do get new construction, and I want to make sure that we kind of get some guidance if there's any sticking points with a specific application, that we're providing that feedback for applicants.
And I'd just like to say that I really like this committee. Everyone is very passionate. We don't always agree, but I respect everyone here and their opinion. And I think it ultimately serves our community and our historic districts the best, that we have a variety of opinions, and that, there's nothing personal here. We really care about that district. There's lots of different views you can have on
it. The only other thing I wanted to add was the applicants need to be reminded that the burden of proof is with them. You probably already do that, I'm guessing.
I can work on changing up the messaging so they're getting it better.
So
I'll try a couple different options.
Yeah, just because it's not up to you to do the burden of proof as staff, certainly not. It's not up to us. It's up to the applicant to do the burden of proof.
Yes,
and I'm just wondering, in the code itself where it says the application processes, maybe we need to change that, because it says that in there. Well, it kind of implies it, but maybe we need to highlight that a little bit better in the code, just so it's more obvious to them. It's like, you basically need to come in and defend yourself.
I'm thinking that as you guys are talking about writing up something about what you guys are wanting to see for applications, part of what I can also be writing up is basically a step-by-step guide to doing a historic project. Like explaining, like, it is up to you to prove that you meet these things. Part of that is providing visuals. And so maybe it's a companion guide to, like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to show up to your hearing. You're going to defend, your application. This is what you should expect. Things like that. I think it would be helpful to people who maybe feel like this process is a little daunting to have maybe a guide to how this is. We do try to do that on the front of our sheets and stuff, But, if we're being honest, we probably write it a little bit too much like government workers, and we're not quite accessible enough yet with kind of that guidance. And so maybe that is something that I can also commit to doing alongside to make this process better, is if you will bring me tips and tricks to getting through your commission, this is what your commission is looking for. I will also endeavor to do a much more plain English version of this is what the process is going to look like. This is your responsibility as part of that process.
So Cameron, what you said, the burden of proof, so that technically in this case, it would be the preponderance of the evidence, not beyond a reasonable doubt, because this is not a criminal court. So it's a preponderance of whatever evidence we're given meets the burden of proof, not beyond a reasonable doubt.
I never said beyond a reasonable.
No, I know.
I
just
agree.
pointed
No,
it
I
out.
agree
You
with
just
you.
said- and I just thought, okay, you're right.
The
What
burden of proof is up to us individually. That's why we don't always agree on everything.
burden of proof is beyond a reasonable doubt or
Well, the burden of proof means who has to provide the information.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Who's
we're
providing the
relying,
information?
just what
The
Kathy,
applicant
we're
to provide
relying
the
on them to
information.
give us evidence. And that's the evidence we go on. And is it beyond a reasonable doubt? Do we have to check every single column, or do we just take the preponderance of the evidence we're given and make the decision? I think that's true. And we could come down differently on it. I presume we will, yeah. I never thought of it that way. I appreciate your comment because it actually gets to the heart of the issue.
I didn't mean that to be, it has to be beyond.
No.
You own a historic home, criminal.
No, but you're right. We're making a quasi-judicial decision based on the evidence. Yeah.
Okay, so some brief staff updates. So you should have a letter in front of you from U of O talking about a process that we are embarking on. Very excitedly, I am not in charge of this. I am just a passenger or a bystander. But what we are looking for is maybe 2 members of the commission who would want to serve on a steering committee for this project. I do not need an answer today, just think about it. And then for those of you who are not necessarily sure, you can dedicate the time it would take for a steering committee, which is a bit more of a time commitment. There is also apparently some kind of one-off or more minimal involvements available for this project. So just kind of as a recap, Kathy, you may or may not have this in front of you. I don't know if I mailed it out.
I don't have it.
Okay, so the University of Oregon, in conjunction with the State Historic Preservation Office, we're basically part of a pilot program to create a disaster heritage resiliency program. So we are not paying any money. This is being provided to us, which is very exciting. And part of what it's looking for is stakeholders in the community, so heritage resources, and kind of talking about specifically from the standpoint of disaster resiliency, kind of what resources we have, what role they could play in, say, rebuilding Albany after a disaster, but also thinking about our heritage resources in ways of like, how are they susceptible to natural disasters? So the example they usually give is in Cottage Grove, which was the initial one that they did, and they were now expanding. As part of their program, when their stakeholders got together, they all realized that they didn't have like a physical location to store their digital archives. So, when you have the digital archives, there is, a physical place where they live. And so as a result, these museums kind of had all banded together to share the cost of I think a storage unit that was outside of any area of known disaster, like floodplain and things like that. And so that was like a tangible thing that came out of that, is thinking about how they can kind of make sure their heritage resources are surviving. So that's the explanation I've gotten from the state about what it's going to be. And so, yep, we're in the process of forming the steering committee.
So this is separate from our historic survey that
Yes.
we did get a response from the University of Oregon's?
Yes.
And have we shared that?
I think it might be on the list to share, but I just wanted to get the steering committee thing out of the way to talk about. So just think about it. If you have the time to dedicate to a steering committee, I think the general thought is it would be maybe 1 or 2 hours a month, but meeting regularly. And if you are interested, I can get you in touch with Melissa, who's the project lead, for more information. And then, so on to the next thing, we had the University of Oregon chat with us about doing potential updates. So it's kind of a mixed bag. This is for our historic inventory survey, to clarify. They can do it. They maybe cannot do it in the timeline we're hoping for. They say 900 properties, which is about what we have across our districts, plus our local historic inventory, is quite a bit of a lift. They're also moving the program down from Portland to Eugene, so they're kind of starting up again. They're very excited to partner with us, which is a plus. But if we're looking for things to be done like in a year or 2 years, that is not something that they're necessarily committing to.
Yeah, we've waited like 40 years. So
Yep.
I think if they're willing to work with us, I would encourage them, whatever it takes, even if it takes 2 or 3 classes to go through. I was actually, so I'm the one that reached out to University of Oregon, and I didn't know if I expected a response, but I think it's ideal if we can get the students involved. The students were involved at University of Oregon during our original one. And so it would be great to get their help. And even if it took 3 or 4 years, I've been trying to get this done for 15.
And we don't have a timeline, a hard out for the inventory. We
This
do for
is-
our code updates.
Correct. So the code updates are going to be separate. The inventory, it's kind of a self-imposed deadline. You know, the sooner we have it, the better information we have. They're not able to commit to necessarily a certain timeline. It's kind of dependent. They do a specific class where they talk about actually surveying. And so this would be kind of a practical application of what they're learning.
And it could start something like that as early as fall or winter later this year.
Well,
And also, we got the heads nodding in the right direction when it came to looking for money to pay for it.
Oh, that's even better.
But we don't have anything like a work program set up yet to even get an estimate of how much it would cost. So
Trying to be aware of staff time and that you've already got a million things to do. Could we just like appoint Mason to be the point person on? Would you like to do that, Mason?
I wouldn't be opposed to that. That sounds like it'd be a lot of fun.
Yep. So they are talking about kind of just looping us in. Like I said, they're moving a full program from one university back to U of O. So they're probably going to reconvene with us during the summer. Maybe we could even have them come down and talk to you guys. There are some ideas I can float, but nothing's moving too fast. So
Great.
as long as we're okay with that, it does sound like we've got some motions in the right direction. They're excited. They think that maybe some of their students could pick up some thesis ideas from us. We floated a lot of ideas. There's basically what we were getting is there's a lot there for them. There are things that their students may be interested in further researching. They think it's a great partnership, but they just can't commit to doing it fast.
But it sounds like a lot of movement to me compared to 0, which is what we've had before.
Yeah.
I'm 27 and I really like writing theses. So if you need somebody who's going to be here for a while who can help these students, I might be the guy.
Yeah, see, he's the young guy here, and because it might take another 10 years to get this done.
Yep. So that was encouraging. So, probably less money than if we hired a firm, but on the downside, just more time.
But students are a good resource because this is multifaceted. There could be, geography and GIS, and people that are astute in dealing with, doing internet related stuff so that we can get all of this digitalized. There's students that have all of those talents out there. So.
Yeah, I think exactly. If you could tie it into the GIS so someone could look on the map, click on a property, get the whole Oh, it's a dream come true.
Oh, that is pretty much a requirement at this point.
Yeah.
I think anything that we sign with them would have a requirement that there be a digital version.
Yeah.
Even gather oral histories for places that somebody actually knows something about, and they can have it up there too.
I feel like this is really important. And I think we've made a lot of progress just by reaching out to them and getting a positive response.
Yep. I just most importantly want to kind of set some expectations, just kind of make sure that we're all in the same, place that, they're more than willing to do this. We're just not going to see a full and complete thing come through. So we are going to have to be patient as they move forward with things being piecemealed. You will still see some inventories that are very, very sad.
Can I assign them grades based on?
No, Mason, you can't. Alyssa, I have a real quick question.
Yes, Kathy.
Does the fire department have a list of the addresses of the properties, the historic properties, and know the boundaries of the districts?
I don't know if the fire department does. Any particular reason the fire department specifically?
Well, now don't take this the wrong way. I don't think San Diego did everything right at all, and I don't want to do that. But we did have our fire department in San Diego did have a list so that they would know whether they're going to designate a historic property or not if there's a fire, a house fire, and for then larger areas. It was important that they wanted that information, and they digitized it and put it in with their other information that they had. It was just so that they would be aware of that aspect of the property if they were going there to fight the fire.
Okay.
Because sometimes fighting fire is destructive, and sometimes they can do things that are not as destructive if they're aware. I mean, firefighters are always very good to try to, save the property.
Okay, that's a good point.
It could be part of that resilience.
Yeah, from a different side, we had a fire recently. So if you're ever down here, there's a fourplex a block away that caught on fire for 4th of July. They got the award. And I got all the photos from that. So we had documentation of what had been there and kind of where they were at for rebuild. So I at least got that, but I hadn't thought about there being different techniques for fighting fires if they knew they were.
There might be. And they might also be able to photo document it, because it seems like they do have that. I mean, I don't know if Albany does, but it does seem like they do that as well.
All of the city as well as the public has access to InfoHub, which is our online GIS service. And so there's a layer with the historic districts on it. And also on our website, we've got the whole list of inventoried properties that are in the historic zones. And it just kind of shows to bear like what's going on in Los Angeles is that, urban environments are not immune to fire. And my goodness, I can't even imagine the worst fate than having a district destroyed by fire. So this resilience planning thing might be a really good thing to face.
Yeah, so to tie in this conversation a little bit, you kind of circled back to the resilience thing, because I think it does tie into that a lot. Having been a volunteer firefighter, there are different techniques. When you're at a fire, some of the things you have to do is destructive as far as ventilation, breaking windows, cutting holes in roofs, opening up walls to look for fire extension. There's all kinds of things there. And if a fire department is trained to know it's a historic structure, they can be like, oh, let's not try to break, the panes of this old window. We can hit the vinyl window that was replaced next to it. Just things like that, just as they're aware. The other part of it is just putting extra effort in to protect historic resources as historic resources. The case in point is the Multnomah Falls Lodge. When you had the Eagle Creek fire, they had a full entire strike force dedicated to just that single building that was there the entire night the fire came down. They had a ladder truck from the city of Portland there. They had the Portland Airport fire truck there for the crash truck for foam. They had, I think, like 8 water trucks there, all dedicated to this one building because they knew it was a historic, very important historic resource. It was a landmark So, usually you wouldn't get that kind of scale just in Albany, but on a smaller level, they can go, oh, this is a historic resource. This is of value as a cultural importance to the community. And so, yeah, I think it does. This goes right back to the resiliency. It would really tie into that.
Mhm.
Yeah, unfortunately, we lost a lot of structures that are irreplaceable, green and green. I mean, that particular neighborhood and area had a lot of historic homes. And it's been weighing very heavily on me, not only, the human tragedy and people's lives, but also the structures that can never be replaced.
So I just have two last things to mention. I'm trying to be, conscious of time. So one thing that we're actually aiming to get off the ground is, so based on feedback, I hope I'm mentioning this again. It's not the first time I'm mentioning it. A historic district mixer. So one of the main kinds of feedback we were getting is that people don't know who to reach out to, things like that. And so there was an interest from newer members of kind of the historic districts to learn from seasoned hands who have been doing this for a while. There are property owners who have tips and tricks for how to repair their houses and things like that. But there's also the intangible community that some people were expressing seems to be missing these days from the historic district. And so one of the things that we thought we could do is basically a mixer event where we would just invite anybody who lives in the historic district. I mean, it's open to anybody, honestly, but geared towards the historic district, and people could come and kind of talk about that, but also just make connections. If we brand it as a historic district mixer, we can use our money on that. So that's why it's that. And basically the thought just being that people can start to make connections with people who may be able to help them figure out how to do things on their house that aren't a wholesale replacement. So some members of our focus groups that we were talking to were people who were handy and had worked on old houses before and basically just knew how to do minor repairs to keep things from getting to a place where they needed to be fully replaced. So that's kind of the thought there. Kind of just looking for ideas and maybe some folks who would like to help with some detail planning.
I'd be willing to help. I think it's a fantastic idea. And we could meet in the Carnegie Library or someplace, or I don't know where the best place to meet is, but.
We're inviting the whole district, probably the Riverside Community Center.
Okay.
The city also has a policy that we have to use city property for city meetings. And the thing with the Carnegie Library, bless it, is that it is not the most accessible building.
Oh, that's right.
So that
I'd be happy to help. Reach out to me if you want. I think, because I know quite a few of the contractors in the district, and I could reach out to them as well. And again, it gets to the problem that we were just talking about. We don't get the right information from people. They don't know what's expected. And being able to bring some examples to that and just sit and chat with people and make those connections could go a long way, as well as just good PR for our committee.
Yep. And so part of the hope would be is just, it's a different setting than being here doing a public hearing. People can, it's an opportunity to learn. And then quite frankly, if they're just there to eat free food, they're just there to eat free food. But maybe they'll make some connections and they'll get some good advice.
Yeah, I think networking is great. I think having a carrot, we need more carrots out there for sure. And where was I going with this? So this would probably work well for preservation months, which is coming up.
It would. I'm hoping to do it in March or April though. And that's because my last thing, the newsletter. I am like halfway through writing a first draft of the newsletter. I'm interested to see if anybody wants to write any articles or contribute in some way. Our communication director for the city put me together a little template because I am not, I didn't go to school for design. Graphic design is not my passion. So he took pity on me, but I've got something fairly good going. I found an old book from the 80s that talks about the styles you find downtown. And I'm going to go through that as kind of like an issue by issue thing. So start with, I think the Federalist style, talking about the Monteith House. They're really cool. They're hand-drawn images of historic buildings. Cameron, you may have seen this book already. It's like a historic guide to architecture in Albany, Oregon. Okay, well, I will have to show it to you. Actually, anybody can come look at it. But it's really cool. It was done in the 80s. I think the date on the images is 80 by like, I want to say a Toffer.
Is this the
Ah.
one in the visitor guide? By
It
any
might
chance?
be.
So I probably have seen that one then, yeah.
Okay. But anyway, so I was going to do that. I've reached out to Friends of Historic Albany to see if they want to do like a reoccurring thing. One of the things we floated is doing staff or commission member profiles, just so we are less scary to people. And then I think the feature for this first issue was going to be about the Cumberland Church getting listed in that process.
Oh, yeah.
And then on the back is our thing that's like, hello, if you are in our district, please contact us about your alterations, which was the plan. And then it includes a map showing where the property boundaries are for the districts as well.
This is quarterly, right?
Yes, it's going to be quarterly. So I'm going seasonal, so I don't have to commit to a certain month. But the goal is to get a winter of 2025 out. And to me, May is unfortunately not winter, which is why I'm trying to get the newsletter out so that we can do the mixer. But I might be too ambitious. It might end up in May.
Thank you for doing this. This is really needed.
Yes. So it would be nice if people can help me fill in articles and things like that. We do have 4 pages, maybe 3. I'm trying to picture it.
Half, because then the back page, part of that is the mail label has to go.
I think it's 3, yeah, because the back page is your mailing on top and then the image and like call us about your exterior alterations. So 3 pages. So I might be good for now, but if anybody is interested in doing stuff for spring, that would be great.
I'm happy to help. I don't do anything. I just sit around. So I'm happy to help you out with some information or writing up something about something fun.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Cameron, didn't you do something about Charles Burgraff, or was that
No,
Oscar maybe?
No, I did want to talk last year in Corvallis actually about how to research the history of your house, which I'm thinking about doing this year in Albany. But that's, you could take sections of that and include this in the newsletter so that people that can't attend a talk can get some of those tips over several issues of the newsletter. That's a possibility.
Yeah, an article on Charles Burgraff would be very interesting.
Sounds like you just signed up to write for it. Write it.
I already have a speech I'd done a while. I have to dig it up, but I could probably turn it into an article.
I believe there's a Burgraff tour either on Visitors or somewhere hiding on the Downtown Association website. I'm happy to track that down for you so that you don't have to start from scratch. And I believe it seems like Old Times is the publication you might have been referring to. It's the
Yeah, that's correct. Seems like Old Times.
Association publication.
We have the one I found is a little square book, and it's like a guide to historic Albany, Oregon.
Oh, that's even better.
Yellowish.
Wow.
It's pretty cool. Sounds like I'll bring it for show and tell in February.
Yeah, I'd like to see that one.
So that's where we're at. I know that we've kind of covered a lot of ground here, but it is a high priority to get the newsletter out, and I am trying to commit to getting it out in February, barring unforeseen circumstances. So
I'm
that's
the heavy that's going to have to deal with Article 7.
Oh,
I think I can speak for everyone that we believe that staff, David and Alyssa, that you have gone above and beyond my experience of being here for 20 years. And really, we applaud you and thank you very much for all your hard work.
Agreed.
Here,
yes. Yes.
Thanks. All right, and I think that's it. We can talk about more of this stuff in depth in February. It's like 2 weeks from now.
Do we have any public hearings on the horizon for February, or?
We almost did, but now we don't. So what may be helpful is, so last year we were under the impression that we should have started earlier planning for Historic Preservation Month, but also thinking about historic awards. So maybe since we don't have any land use hearings, we can kind of get into that. Maybe, yeah, make a workshop like David said.
I agree.
So if people want to come prepared with some ideas maybe for either of those, I think that'd be good, a good place to start. And then hopefully I'll be able to share a draft of the newsletter. I don't know. I said hopefully, I'm not promising. It is only 3 pages, but it's exciting.
I have a weird obsession of copy edit, so if you send me that draft, I can give you some copy edits.
Sweet. Oh, and then I was also going to have them live on our website. So even if people, accidentally throw their copy away because they thought it was spam or something, they can always find it again.
Sure.
And there is also an option for them to request just to receive it virtually as well. But the plan is to just mail it to everybody.
Very good.
Good.
Any questions or redirects for staff? All right, I think we've concluded. Our next meeting date is February 5th, 2025. I close it at 8:10. We're adjourned.